Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Planning Perspectives podcast. I'm your host, Kate Duffy, financial advisor with Bryn Mawr Trust, here with my co-host, Jamie Hopkins.
Great to see you, Kate. Thanks for bringing us into the show today.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about our topic today because we're talking about practicing retirement and what we can do throughout our decades to align ourselves with a life that will take us into retirement. So, Jamie, talk to us a little bit about what practicing retirement means.
Yeah, well, I think this is an exciting topic, and we're not going to have a guest on today because we pivoted a little bit. We had Christine Benz on a couple weeks ago, and so if you haven't listened to that episode, it's a little bit of a lead into this one. Although, right, it's not like a prequel type thing, so you don't necessarily need to watch the whole thing. But, we got a viewer question after it that said, like, well, how do I practice this? Like, I get all this retirement planning and all these things you can do, but how do I actually practice it? And it is a great question. So hopping into that, what does it mean? It means thinking about things that you're going to do differently in this stage of life that we call retirement. But for young people, we can't even think about retirement yet. But what are the things we're going to do differently at this phase of life when maybe work becomes optional? And how can we start testing out some of those today to say, like, can I get better at some of these things? In one of my books I wrote about before that we mostly learn about saving while preparing for retirement, but we don't learn about like how to change our lifestyle and align our values with how we're spending our money and investing, or how do we spend our time, or how to spend down our portfolio. So there's all these different things that eventually we need to get good at, but we don't really get to practice them in our normal life up until we retire. So it's kind of this like cold turkey moment. Now we're retired. Now we got to learn all these new things. But there are ways that we can layer this in between where we are today and over the phases of our lives to get better at some of these topics and some of these activities we're going to have to do later on in life.
Because early on, we can actually set ourselves up for these practices. You talk about a cold turkey moment because we're not necessarily maybe paying attention because so much of life is happening that you get caught up in the moment, you get caught up in the routine. And then when it comes time to retire, what you end up seeing is a lot of people going into retirement and then getting themselves back into the workforce.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of behavioral changes that we can make along the way that we're not necessarily adopting during pre-retirement.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ones I always said SNS, saving, not spending. That's the biggest one I always think about. So we're told forever, right? If you just use your 401k, put a little money aside, invest it, save it, you'll just keep seeing this balance go up. And that's good. But then you get to retirement and actually you have to do the opposite. You got to take this balance and for most of Americans, spend it down over the course of retirement. And we've been told for our entire lives that's bad. So what you see in people is this spending down their life savings in retirement feels super painful. And the US spending data actually shows that people tend to actually underspend in retirement, not overspend, because they're kind of like, there's this behavioral side that we've told you forever that spending down this money is bad. As long as it's going up and to the right for 30 years, it's good. And then you retire and we say, just kidding. You don't need to know that at all anymore. You need to know how to spend this. And that's a really big, like emotional, behavioral, like psychological and educational shift that most people are just not ready for. So again, we'll get into some of these ways. There are ways to kind of like train yourself, to teach yourself about this behavior so it doesn't feel like a loss when you get to retirement.
I like how you talk about the spending, not saving part, because I think of practice saving to spend.
Yeah.
Like whenever you're saving for a vacation or if you're saving for a down payment for a house, you are saving, but then practice the actual skill of spending it and keep that front of mind so that as we do get to retirement, because you do see a lot of people who hold on to their money, they're afraid of running out of money because we're living longer today. So it is, how do we think about these practices and implement them in our lives early on too?
Yeah, we will talk about this a lot in the show because I'm a big fan of it, but bucketing is an approach that you can use throughout your whole life. And so bucketing is this notion of the behavioral side is mental accounting, that we assign values and reasons to things. So like we mentally, if you have a swear jar at home when people swear and you throw money in, like and you use that, say, for like Pizza Friday or whatever you use it for, that money becomes mentally assigned in your head for that. But realistically, money is fungible. It could be used for any purpose, but we don't. Like, we assign it to that. And so you see people do this throughout their lives, that you might have a bank account where you put the money in that you pay your mortgage out of, or here's the one you pay your credit card bill, or here's the one that you save. And by assigning these different buckets of money values and reasons, we actually are more likely to follow through on them. So that becomes this notion of bucketing. That can be used in retirement too, for how we spend and how we invest. But I think thinking about how we spend in buckets can be helpful to kind of prepare. So instead of just having one pool of money that you spend everything out of, actually assigning different reasons for and different accounts for how you're going to spend is one of those tips. So you can start to learn about this ahead of time while you're still working. So I even tell people sometimes to name the accounts. In some of your bank accounts and online places, you can go and rename an account. So you actually, it doesn't just have to be like Jamie's checking account. You can go title it whatever you want. So you can say like the whatever mortgage, right? The mainline mortgage, and that is the name of your account. So it's very much tied to that purpose.
I think that's an interesting concept because we're doing that. You had talked on a previous show about saving for someone else, saving through a 529 account.
Right.
We have those automatically in some types of accounts, and the visualization actually helps. Like you think about your children going to college and funding that for them, or you think about buying a house or buying a second house, maybe. It's identifying these things, which also helps you work towards it. It is a very specific goal. There's also, when we think about retirement, it isn't just the money side of it. So there's a whole shift from a lifestyle, from identity. You have been in a working community primarily for the majority of your adult life. And then a lot of people think about retirement as freedom. And so it is this entire shift from you're getting up every day, going to an office or to whatever your workplace is. You've created friends in the community that you're in. And then again, in that shift, it's if you're in a partnership, you might be home with that person all the time. And what is that going to look like when you're not spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day primarily with that person, and then you shift into it? So there's a lot of the communities we think of, that part of it, finding purposeful communities in retirement, finding other ways that you can enjoy your time, thinking about hobbies, thinking about maybe finding a common hobby with your partner to enjoy retirement, a travel, or what are these other things that you think about doing in retirement that maybe you're not doing now? And how do we start to phase them into our lives? Because you don't want to flip the switch when it comes to money and identity at one point in time. It can be very overwhelming. So the practicing of retirement, I think, is just such a great topic for today.
Yeah. Well, isn't that something they say, like, don't switch jobs, move, and start a new relationship all at the same time, right? And but you picked one activity or hobby, right, that you want to continue into retirement, although it's many years away. But
I did.
Yeah,
I did. So it's funny. It actually came about one time. It was the holidays, and it was a last minute gift. My dad does not like getting things. He likes to spend time with people and his family, and it is a good thing. So I was rushing around one Christmas Eve, and I didn't have a gift, and I happened to walk by a ballroom, and I was like, my dad would love this. Like, it's time together. It's a different activity. And it got me into ballroom dancing. And what I realize is it's so different than what we do every day in a professional way. It works a different side of the brain. And it's an activity that you actually have to completely stop thinking about everything else, because you have to learn how to move your body in sync in this dance. And I realized that it was something that brought me a lot of joy. It got me involved in a community outside of work. Yeah. And that could definitely take me into retirement. So it was practicing these little things, bringing that in and saying, I hopefully can take this into like the next 40 years or so. So it's finding these other activities which help you practice again in your mind, like, how are we going to make this shift over time, and being purposeful about it.
Yeah, and I think when we move through all phases of lives, there's things that we have to let go of and leave and give up and shift. similar for me. Like I used to play a lot of soccer and basketball and like men's leagues and things here in Philadelphia. In the last couple of years, I pretty much stopped all of that, right? So I do yoga now almost exclusively. I probably need to come up with one other thing, but it was just time, right? Like my goals had shifted. Like I don't want to play soccer anymore. And the last time I played a game, I broke my leg and that was it. And I was like, I'm done now. I'm not doing it anymore because I want to be like healthy for my grandkids when I'm older. So playing another 10 years of like semi-competitive soccer is not going to be helpful for that. So the goals in your lifestyle shift. So do the activities in life. And they're going to shift number of times across our lives. Like even retirement is not one stage, right? It's multiple different variations of life that are going to sometimes hard shift, and health events and life events are going to occur. And sometimes it's going to be a slow shift over many, many years. But let's talk a little bit about that and like different stages of life and how we can practice retirement all throughout our stages, right? So let's start there in your 20s and 30s. And so give me some habits or something there, Kate, that you might think about when we're, earlier on, right? We're finished up college, or if we went to a trade school or wherever we find ourselves now in our 20s, early career, what should we be thinking about?
The decade of the 20s is so fun and exciting because you are in a life transition then. Yeah. Just like you said, you're moving into the workforce in some way, shape, or form. And it is a really great time to set yourself up for success when you think about what habits can I fold into my new life? I mean, that might not be front of mind because you've got freedom, you're out of school, you're getting your first place, whether you're renting or buying, you're in a professional environment or a trade environment for the first time and working with other people. But I think one of the things that we can do are automatically just take advantage of free money out there. So if you have an employer 401k plan and they match, definitely sign up for that. Actually, sign up for that whether they match or not, because this is one great thing you can do is automate some of your practices. So if you off the bat start to contribute to your 401k, you hopefully will not miss that money. And if you do, you can always make adjustments, but you're starting small, you're thinking about the future, and you're paying yourself first. I think that's one really great habit. And then pay attention to the things that you like to do and that you don't like to do, because that's really important. Early on, if you are doing work or doing anything extracurricular that you're forcing yourself to do that you actually don't like, it's going to set you up for a little bit of a hardship later. So just be aware of the things that you enjoy doing in life and do more of those things. Spending plans. I think budgeting can be a very harsh word for some people because they automatically think I have to cut everything out that I want to do. I think about spending plans. Where is that you want to spend your money? What is important to you at this point in time? And let's put together a loose plan to start. Don't make it so rigid for yourself that you back off of doing it. But think about a spending plan. Where do you have to spend your money on your housing, your car, whatever it might be? Where do you want to spend your money? What are the things that you enjoy doing from an extracurricular perspective, and set yourself up for success in that way? Because again, these habits are going to take us through the decades.
Yeah, and I think the spending plan, both at this time and all the way through life, and incredibly so in retirement, is also about giving yourself permission to spend on items. And I think that's really, to me, over the years, what I've landed on is this is really about giving permission to yourself. Because what you see is that even if somebody decides to spend something, they feel bad about it. And that's where I see it in budgeting. Budgeting is powerful to some degree to like put restraints and structure around your world, but even just the way that often it's, structured or phrased, it feels like, to your point, this like, I've got to cut things to budget. Well, budgeting can also give you permission, but if you kind of rephrase it sometime, like, here's my spending plan. So now I know what I'm allowing myself to spend on. And so then when I go to that restaurant that is in my spending plan or budget, like, it's okay. Like, I don't have to feel bad about it, because I know so many people that feel bad about spending on things because they're like, well, I'm not supposed to do that. And it's like, well, who said you're not supposed to do it? Like you might have put that on yourself. yourself, or your spouse. Like, that was actually the call I had this morning with somebody, was like their spouses are fighting about how they spend money because they have such different views of it, right? Where one will spend for convenience and the other one wants to drive around the block 16 times to find a free parking spot instead of paying. But like, that tension can be a lot, right? And it's hard, and you have to have those conversations too. And sometimes it's about like giving both parties permission to spend in a relationship on like, hey, what are we okay spending on and what are we not okay spending on?
I think that's a great point, because that also means you have to be talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be talking about what is meaningful for you from an experience and money perspective, and open up the dialogue if you are in a partnership, because we know that money can create a lot of tension between in coupleships.
And I'll add one more as we move out of this 20s and 30s, because you briefly mentioned it before, which is this like visualization, this naming. You know, I'm if you're listening to the show, I'm going to bring this one up a lot because I really believe in it, which is, you know, when you think about like 529, let's say you're late 20s, early 30s, you have a kid and you get the 529, like I would start calling that something else instead of just a 529 account. Like I would say that that's, you know, my daughter, like her Notre Dame fund, because like I love Notre Dame, right? I'm up late watching them on Saturday nights when they're playing night games, but it connects me to this like actual future thing instead of just saying like college or universities. Cause then I'm like, well, what's that whole world going to look like? And it takes me to this other thing. Like, I don't even know what the, you know, university world's going to look like in 20 years. But, you know, I kind of still assume in my head, like I still care about this brand that's out there and this football team and university and history that's tied to this. And maybe she doesn't go there. That's perfectly fine. But it does add like a sense of emotion to me and the item. And I think if you're looking to buy a house when you're young too, like, even though it might not be the exact place, but like describe the house you want to buy a bit, maybe even get a photo of something that's similar to what you want to buy and put that in there as you start to save towards it. And I think that's really going to help you visualize this. Probably in your 20s and 30s, you're not thinking about retirement yet. But as we get through this, for retirement, I think it's the same thing. Like start visualizing what it's going to look like, the house you're going to live in, like the porch you'll have, or the type of like, you know, 1-story home, whatever it is in this world that you'd be happy to live like a financially free life.
I appreciate that. I adopted this mantra a couple years ago, and it's live retirement. It's doing exactly what you're saying. It's visualizing what do I want my life to look like in 20 years, and how do I fold some of that in now? So I love the idea of naming other things, the visualizing of it. And I also want to say, always like check in, because we don't always stick to the budgets, and we don't always do the things we say we're going to do. And that's okay. Just give yourself an opportunity to check back in. Maybe it's once a year. What did I say I was going to do? What have I been doing? And if I'm not doing some things, do I still want to be doing them? And if so, how do I get myself back on track?
All right. Well, let's fast forward then. Now we're in our 40s and 50s, although they're very different decades, but, you know, different time periods that relates to retirement, right? So now we're probably starting to think about this a bit. So what are some things that you think we should do to actually practice this in these years?
Well, I think always reflecting on what's gone on in your 20s and 30s, how your life has shaped up. What we talked about this the other day. It's once you've experienced a little bit of life, your values come to light a little bit more. You can identify the areas of your life that you want to change and how you want to shape it going forward. And so I think it's really important to tune into that, and then shape your financial life so that you're actually expressing your values through how you spend your money, through your consumption, and aligning what you feel inside is right to what is external. Because that's where we start to fine tune the next couple of decades. Again, this gradual shift leading into retirement.
Yeah, I think some things can be really small. And I actually mentioned this on a different episode too, but it happened again this weekend with my son. So I think I've mentioned like trash that lays out now. I like pick up a lot of times if I see a trash can or otherwise. And my son, I was not picking up anything. And he just looked at me. He's like, Dad, you're really good for the environment. And I was like, why'd you say that? He's like, well, because you always pick up trash. And I was like, okay. But this value-based thing about caring about the future of the planet. And I also just think about like our community. Like I don't want trash everywhere in the community that I live. So if I pick up one thing a day, you know, over the next 10 years, it's thousands of things that I've picked up that aren't laying around somewhere. And, but that's like starting to align my values with the lifestyle that I might live. Now, in retirement, maybe I volunteer for multiple things a day as it relates to environmental cleanup or work or replanting things. But you kind of like test drive these little activities in your life earlier on. I think the other one is starting to understand like different locations, because I have met people, and as you have too, like, hey, I might retire to Florida. And I'm like, when's the last time you've been to Florida? They're like, like 15 years ago. And I'm like, okay, so maybe you should go to Florida, right? And just spend a week there, and not like at Disney. But if you think you might want to live in Boca, like go spend some time in Boca and see what that is like. Do you enjoy it there? Not as like a full vacation, but just go spend some time at these locations, especially when you get into your mid 50s, because now you're actually really are thinking about like, where might I be moving if I retire in the next 5 to 10 years? And I think test driving that and spending time there, and I do have to keep stressing, but not a vacation.
Right.
It is not going to Disney and saying, well, I kind of like Florida, Disney was great, and then spending 3 days in Miami. Like that is not what your retirement's probably going to look like. So test it out, like rent a house for a month, stay there, maybe even work remotely if you can for 2 weeks, see what that experience is like. I think the other one are, you know, we talk about health, is this becomes really important. And I mentioned that on the soccer, like start figuring out the health and the lifestyle you want to live. Like if you're not taking care of yourself in your 40s and 50s in the way that you want to make those changes, then it's not going to get easier when you're 65. And you do see people, they're like, well, I'm going to focus on that later and later, but it's going to pay off. So I really do think, right, health is wealth. And so test driving some of the ways you're going to take care of yourself earlier on is really important. And then one last one here, like this is really when you need to start modeling out what your future spending might look like. It's the first time. 20s and 30s, there's no need to look at any type of retirement income projection. It's a waste of time and not useful. But I'd say late 40s, early 50s is the very first time you should say, well, what would spending look like in retirement? And then actually maybe doing a month where you spend like that. So this is probably one of the more practical ones we first got to here on like how to test this out, is spend like you're in retirement for 1 month. And we've actually talked about maybe doing the no spending month at some point too and testing it out, but we'll get to that at a different show. But truly take a month of what you think retirement would be like. And if you think you can spend 70% less or 30% less in retirement, or 50% less, do it for a month. And can you live like that for a month? And if you can, then you know what, I could live that lifestyle and then go back to your normal life. But that can be a really good way to kind of first test drive what this spending might look like in retirement. That's
a great practice, because if you think about it, when you first retire, we call them the go-go years.
Yeah.
You were talking about your health, making sure that, you are living in alignment with your health, with how you want to live in retirement. And what that ends up doing is giving you this permission again to live the first few years of retirement as you've envisioned them. Because if we think about it, I mean, for me, I think about travel. And a lot of people have these grandiose ideas. You have to have the energy, you have to have the health to be able to do some of these things. Yeah. And so practicing that from a budgetary perspective and also from a lifestyle perspective is very important.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the 5 years out of retirement. So, we're I know this is not the average for everybody anymore, but you kind of think at that 60 to 65 to 70 range, right? That decade is when the vast majority of people retire. So that is the thing that we're really looking at. And so what should we start doing 5 years before we retire to actually test out retirement, right? Practice retirement.
So I think it's a culmination of a lot of what we've talked about already. If we have this idea of what we want retirement to look like, if we have sort of a rough idea of how much we're going to spend in retirement, start implementing that into your life. It's these bite-sized pieces, because again, these large life transitions, you don't want it to be a light switch. You want to be able to help yourself through it help your emotions not get overwhelmed and just take bite-sized pieces and start to phase in some of these things.
Yeah. And so I just wrote a new book. It comes out in a couple months, but it's called Your Retirement Sketchbook. And it goes through this whole life phase of retirement, from saving, investing, preparing for retirement, retiring, right? Which is a lot of these. Like, the actual process of retiring really means preparing and then living it. And so some of the things I say in there are like, if you think you're going to move when you retire, move before you retire. Just going back to like, don't change relationships, work, and move all at the same time. Retire move a couple years before you retire. Now, if it's totally out of state, that's not practical. But if you're going to move or downsize around when you retire, I say do it before you retire, so you get used to living in this house, in this new environment. The next one is set boundaries. So we'll talk about this for a second here, but boundaries are really important when it comes to retirement, because other people's expectations are going to change of you that you might have not changed of yourself. Or they're going to stay consistent, that you're paying for your kids' cell phone bill forever and you're retiring and you need to get that off, right? Like, that's not happening anymore. And it's better to do that 5 years out than when you get to retirement and have to make all these changes and just say, hey, look, we're preparing for retirement. We're not going to do this. Also, we're not going to be your free daycare forever. Like, maybe we'll do once or twice a week, but I've seen that before where kids are like, well, I really thought like mom and dad were going to be around more and like help out with the kids. Well, you probably didn't have that conversation with them or them with you. Now, you can't predict what everybody's expectations are going to be around you, but some of these you probably can and say, our boundaries are loose here, but we should reset what our retirement is going to be like to our family and friends. We talked about the practicing spending, but this one's going to be a little different. I've actually gone and said sometimes I think people should try a month where they actually take withdrawals from their retirement accounts, maybe 2 to 3 years before retiring, and actually see what it feels like to take a distribution from an IRA and spend that. Now, yes, there's some tax consequences on that. And so I don't want you to do it for too long. Like, probably doing it for a whole year is probably not a good thing. But for a month, just to get used to like, well, how do I get money from these accounts to actually spend and to actually say, I'm like taking something out of this taxable account, and live through that before you get to retirement. But I just think for a month and just, it's the same amount of money, right? Your paycheck, you could put elsewhere. You could even increase your 401k if you wanted, but just have that experience of pulling the money out and spending it. And then one last one before we move off of this, which goes counter to that, a little bit counter to that point of the saving more, is actually stop saving. So I think you've heard me talk about this before, but I think it's a really important thing to say maybe 2 to 3 years before retirement. Have I saved enough money? And should I stop saving? Like, should I just stop? And also, should I take that money and spend it on things I want to do right now? And maybe that keeps me in the workforce for 6 months longer. And if you stop saving for, say, 3 years, say 10% of your salary, and you work 6 months longer, you are significantly better off financially by working 6 months longer than you are for saving 10% of your salary for 3 years. And that concept is so foreign to people because we think as we're racing towards retirement, the last couple of years, we got to tighten down the hatches, not spend anything, save as much as possible. But it's actually not moving the needle very far. Those last couple of years, right, supercharging savings or cutting back spending, can it have some impacts on the fringes? Or if we go extreme, yes. But for most people, it's not moving the needle. But if we can stay 3 or 6 months longer, because I stop putting money in my 401k and instead I go buy a new car, I go on a vacation that I otherwise would not go on if I left my job, can allow you to stay in the workforce longer. And it's not just something I've made up and doesn't work. I have numerous people. Actually got a message from somebody last month. He stayed in the workforce probably 3 more years since the last time he heard me say this. He did buy a new car and he does a really nice vacation for his whole family now. And he stopped saving any money and he spends it all. But it's allowed him to do things like, he's like, I would never take my whole family on a vacation and pay for it if I retired. He's like, but because I work, I feel like that's what I'm doing it for. So he gets to do these bigger life events because he stopped saving and stayed in the workforce a little bit longer.
Right. And at that point in time, when you were both not saving and spending, but you have the security of work, you can identify the friction that comes up with these two behaviors and address it at that point in time. Because inevitably, when we start to do that, there's going to be friction that comes up. It's going to be hard to do.
Yeah. Now, well, thank you for coming on. I know I talked a little bit too much there at the end, Kate, but it happens when I get going on this sometimes. So I really hope everybody enjoyed today's episode. As we get questions in from guests, we will cover some of these. So this one was not one we had on our our planning, right, perspectives dashboard, but we shifted because I thought it was a great question. But there's great books out there. Christine Benz's book, How to Retire, is a great book. Your Retirement Sketchbook is on pre-order at Amazon and other places today. And if you haven't met with your advisor or a Bryn Mawr Trust advisor, please reach out. We're happy to talk about what works for your life on planning and practicing retirement. So I think this is a phenomenal conversation. Thanks for some of the behavioral tips too. And for everybody listening, just try one this month. Pick something in there and try it out this month. And make sure, right, you join us in a couple weeks for our next episode. Should be a lot of fun. Kate, anything else you want to add as we wrap up here today?
I just practice retirement. Think about it at every stage of life. The micro habits that you can create early on will really help you in the long run.
All right. Well, thank you everyone else for listening to this week's episode of the Planning Perspectives podcast. I'm Jamie Hopkins, joined by Kate Duffy. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks, and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Planning Perspectives podcast. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes are available. Visit our website at www.bmt.com or call us at 833-973-7633. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Investments, not a deposit, not FDIC insured, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by the bank, may go down in value.